Now today, we're here to talk about the grand 19th century oceanic regattas at the Isles of Shoals. So we're going to step back in time a couple of centuries. Our story starts in the mid-1800s when a middle-class fellow from Portsmouth, Thomas Layton, put up the grand Appledore House Hotel on Appledore Island at the Isles of Shoals. And this attracted a number of resort hotel guests. The Appledore House slept about 400 people. This was good news to the folks on Star Island, the majority of the population at the Shoals, because cod fishing had died down and they were looking to produce income. So given the success of Appledore House and the fact that a number of the families in the village of Gosport on Star Island had been hosting visitors informally, the notion of the Shoals as a resort sort of started up some hotel activity over on Star Island. Now, Thomas Layton put up the initial part of Appledore House in the mid-1800s, and then shortly thereafter, the Atlantic House boarding house opened on Star Island. Thomas expanded Appledore House over on Appledore. Then Gosport House opened on Star Island. And Thomas finally added a third wing to Appledore House. So over the span of a couple of decades, the resort business at the Shoals had grown enormously. And then along came this wealthy merchant from Boston. And he put up a rivaling grand hotel over on Star Island, the Oceanic. What happened is that in the summer of 1872, John Poor, a partner in the Stickney and Poor Mustard and Spice Emporium out of Boston, visited the Shoals and stayed at Appledore House. Here you can see he signed the register. And he visited Appledore House. He asked the Laytons all sorts of questions about running the hotel. And the Laytons, being a friendly family, answered his questions about the economics of the hotel and how you got goods out to the island. And what John Poor did was took this information, hired an agent, and approached all these formerly fishing families in the village of Gosport on Star Island, offering to buy their land. Now, sometimes the people of Gosport didn't realize that their neighbors were also being approached. And by the time John Poor was done at the beginning of 1873, all but 2 plots of land on Star Island had been sold to John Poor. And he put up the Grand Oceanic Hotel. The hotel was pretty amazing. Open for the reception of guests. The Oceanic had 147 rooms, slept 300 people. It had 4 stories and had one of what is thought to be the first elevators in a hotel in the United States. The dining room had 400 seats. They could turn out meals for 1,000 people. You'll note the gas lighting, the chandelier. There was a plant on Star Island, what's now Pell Shack. This plant could convert coal to gas to provide lighting for the hotel. Out in back of the Oceanic, there was a grocery store, a bar, bowling alleys that you can still see down in Pell Hall, a billiard room with 4 pool tables. The hotel had a dancing hall for what they called hops and concerts. It was 80 feet by 40 feet, and they would engage an orchestra for the entire summer season. The original Oceanic had a lawn tennis court, and John Poor kept a fleet of boats for the use of his guests. He had 15 rowboats, 10 sailboats, and 2 schooner yachts. The boat you see in the foreground of this image is called an Isles of Shoals boat. It was designed particularly for smooth sailing between the islands at the shoals. If you were a guest at the Oceanic, you had your choice when it came to bathing. You could have a warm or a cool bath. You could have fresh or salt water. Mail was delivered to the Oceanic on Star Island 3 times a day from the mainland. The hotel was 275 feet by 40 feet, and it ran from, if you were on the island now, the tennis courts through to the Elliott Memorial Building, or EMB. Here's the photograph. You see the original Oceanic on the left and many of the cottages and boarding houses of the former fishermen of the Isles of Shoals. And most of those who had sold their land to John Poor on Star deeply regretted having left the island and relocating to the mainland. So they kind of got back at John Poor, as you can see in this report from the New York Times. The hotel is named the Oceanic, but the fishermen of Gosport, taking umbrage at the efforts of Mr. Poor, the proprietor, to get them off the island, have called it the Poor House. John Poor put in the pier that allowed large vessels to dock at Star Island, the pier that we still use today. And in the second season of the hotel, the Oceanic, John Poor decided to hold a regatta, a sailing regatta. They were to sail out from Gosport Harbor to Boone Island and back. And the steamer Major, pictured here on the bottom right, would connect with trains that left from Boston to Portsmouth to bring out guests for the regatta. Gosport Harbor was filled with sailboats. Poor sent invitations to every yacht club in the United States, about 500 of them. There were almost 50 vessels that registered to participate in the race. And the race was to take place on a beautiful August day in the summer of 1847. Again, they were to sail 26 miles up and around Boone Island and back to Gosport Harbor. One of the vessels participating in the race was the schooner America. It was owned by the equally famous General Benjamin Butler. Now, Butler didn't have enough men to crew his boat, the America, so there was a fishing crew from Rockland, just moored in Gosport Harbor, and Butler basically shanghaied them and insisted they come aboard and help race the America in the Oceanic Regatta. Now, Butler was a controversial, colorful, dynamic, and audacious politician. He was born in Deerfield, New Hampshire. His father died when he was young, so his single mom moved the family to Lowell, Massachusetts, where she ran a boarding house for the mill workers. Butler was schooled for 1 term at Phillips Exeter, pictured here. A classmate described him as a reckless, impetuous, headstrong boy. And he was basically expelled from Phillips Exeter for fighting. He went on to attend Colby College up in Maine. He got a law degree and he practiced law quite successfully, mostly criminal defense and bankruptcy law. He was a general in the Civil War, kind of considered rather ineffective. He was a poor strategist, but a really good administrator. Now, during the Civil War, Butler served as the military governor of New Orleans, and the women of New Orleans did not appreciate their town being occupied by the Union. So they would spit at Union soldiers and insult them. And at one point, evidently, a woman was in an upper window of her home and saw a Union admiral passing underneath her house on the street, and she emptied her chamber pot on his head. And Butler had it with the women of New Orleans at that point. So he issued what was called General Order Number 28. As the officers and soldiers of the United States have been subject to repeated insults from the women, calling themselves ladies of New Orleans, in return for the most scrupulous non-interference and courtesy on our part, it is ordered that hereafter, when any female shall, by word, gesture, or movement, insult or show contempt for any officer or soldier of the United States, she shall be regarded and held liable to be treated as a woman of the town plying her avocation. This, as you can imagine, was effective in curbing the insults from the women of New Orleans were delivering to Union soldiers, but it provoked general outrage in the South. In fact, Order Number 28 that Butler issued about the women of New Orleans led to his nickname, Beast Butler, in the South. And the people of the South, particularly New Orleans, started manufacturing these chamber pots with General Butler's image located in the bottom of the bowl. Now, despite General Butler's unpopularity in the South, he was quite progressive as a politician. When he was served in the House of Representatives later on, he was one of only 2 representatives that supported Victoria Woodhull's appearance in front of the House Judiciary Committee, arguing for women's rights to votes. This was in the early 1870s and not a particularly popular thing to do, but Butler felt strongly that women deserved reputation. And later, as the governor of Massachusetts, General Benjamin Butler appointed the very first woman to serve in a state executive position. Butler had a passion for collecting silver, and he was called, in addition to being called Beast Butler, he was called Silver Spoon Butler after the Civil War, because the Union Army confiscated a silverware set of 38 pieces from a woman who was crossing Union lines. And this led to the general perception that Butler and the Union Army looted homes in the South for silver in New Orleans. Again, Butler was rather progressive in his views, but not particularly an effective general. And Lincoln relieved him of command for failing to press the attack. Again, he was a good administrator, not that great of a fighter. So after the Civil War, Butler served 4 terms in Congress and served as the governor of Massachusetts. He, in fact, actually ran for president in 1884. Some of his more progressive views for the time: early on in the Civil War, Butler declared African-American slaves as contraband of war. And what this allowed for, it effectively freed them, because once the Union Army released slaves and took them as contraband, they were free of enslavement. Butler also authored the Ku Klux Klan Act in the early 1870s, which limited the action of the Klan, and co-authored the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which actually banned discrimination based on race in public places. Really progressive for the time. As the governor of Massachusetts, Butler appointed the first African and first Irish American judges in Massachusetts, and he set up a scholarship for African Americans at Phillips Andover. This is General Butler's residence in Lowell, Massachusetts. Pretty good for a kid who was born on a New Hampshire farm and had a single mom. Butler's reputation financially was kind of sketchy. He was thought to have some questionable dealings during the war, given his investments. He was extremely wealthy when he died in the 1890s, estimated net worth of $7 million at that time. Pardon me. He died in the early 1890s, the day after he argued a case before the Supreme Court, and he died of complications from a bronchial infection. But Butler in general had a passion for two things: his family and sailing. And in 1873, the same year Poor put up the Oceanic on Star Island, Benjamin Butler bought the famous schooner America. The schooner America was the first boat to win the race that was eventually known as the American Cup in the early 1850s. It was a race that took place over in Britain. This is a lithograph celebrating the America and Butler's victory in that race. And legend has it that Queen Victoria was in a boat on the water watching that race. And as the America was nearing the finish line, she passed by Queen Victoria's royal yacht. And the Queen turned to one of her military seamen and said, "What boat's coming in second after the America?" And the seaman replied, "Madam, there is no second." The America's design was unique for the times and allowed her to sail extremely swiftly. So after that race, the America was sold to an Englishman who ran her as a boat for the Confederacy, a blockade runner in the Civil War. And the America was scuttled to avoid capture by the Confederacy, and then later raised by capture by the Union Army, and later raised by the Union Army and used on her side. After the Civil War, the America was used as a naval training ship. And in 1873, she came up for auction. So Butler desperately wanted to buy the America. Rumor had it at the time that he had one of his friends start a rumor that the title, the ownership title to the America was in question, which led to a lot of bidders backing off the auction. And Butler was able to purchase the famous yacht America for $5,000. She had cost $20,000 to build. So Butler took the America and kind of refitted her. He had 5 cabins installed for his family members, many upgrades over the 20 years he owned her. And he went and had a tailor make him an outfit, a nautical outfit, that the newspapers reported was worthy of a Gilbert and Sullivan opera. So back to Gosport Harbor, 1874. It's a beautiful day. Everyone participating in the race is getting ready to sail up to Boone Island and back. The Oceanic Piazza or porch is crowded with spectators watching the boats begin the race. The boats take off, and on the return run from Boone Island, Butler in the America with his Shanghaied crew from Rockland directed that the America be sailed to cut through the Duck Island ledges rather than skirting them. Really treacherous water. This allowed the America to be first back to Gosport Harbor. But the boat Vindex had a better time, a better racing time, and was declared the winner. This technicality, though, did not stop General Benjamin Butler from announcing that he won, a title he claimed throughout subsequent years. That evening, with 60 yachts in Gosport Harbor, all who had their lights ablaze, lighting up the water, the Oceanic was full to capacity. The gas lights were all lit, the parlor chandeliers, there was a 10-piece Star Island band playing. Now, despite some of the controversy that arose from the 1874 race, evidently one of the boats that were designed to hold judges, the stake boats, had drifted off course. Poor decided to hold a regatta the next year, 1875, in July. Even more boats registered for that race. And this time, the Oceanic Regatta was to take place over 2 days. The first day would have class races, given the size of boats, and the second day would be the Sweepstakes Race. There was a full-page graphic about the Oceanic Regatta in the New York Daily Graphic, clearly drawn by people who had never visited the Isles of Shoals. But it did attract a lot of attention. And it showed in the bottom, in the middle, the race course from Gosport Harbor to Boone. So Butler, having declared himself the winner of the race, the Oceanic Regatta, the previous year, despite the title being officially given to another boat, shows up for the second regatta. He went ashore dressed in his blue jacket and trouser and rubber boots, and he sat in the parlor of the Oceanic, taking off his boots and putting on his slippers, and regaled the crowd with stories, to the delight of some folks and the dismay of others. The papers reported, the New York Herald, for instance, that 10,000 people had arrived at the Isles of Shoals for the regatta the second year. A steamer was due to come out, the Plymouth Rock, come out from Boston, and was to follow the regatta ships for a couple of hours. There was going to be promenading on the main deck. There was a grand saloon and a first-class restaurant. Gilmore's 22nd Regiment Band was to play, and a choral group, the Madrigal Boys and the Glee Club, were to sing. She was due in the day before the race was to take place, but she was delayed by weather. A fierce storm kicked up, and she couldn't arrive until a couple of days later. The steamer Major also brought people in from Boston. They had taken the Eastern Railway, and the Laytons over on Appledore reported that the race brought so many objectionable people to the Oceanic that their exclusive guests moved over to the Appledore to escape the noise and confusion. The government, of course, got into their own shenanigans at the regatta. As reported by the New Hampshire Patriot, no less than 4 large government steamers and as many more steam launches were at the Oceanic Regatta at the Isles of Shoals. The pay of the officials was doubtless going on at the time, while the cost to the country in the consumption of coal, oil, and the pay of engineers and crew will aggregate a number of thousands of dollars expended to enable officials to go on a spree and have a day's sport. Some things just never change. There was a lot of excitement down at the pier on Star Island because there was a brand new lifeboat design on display. It was a 17 by 6 foot boat. It had 8 watertight compartments on each side and under the seats. 1,200 pounds capacity. It could hold 16 passengers, carried barrels of water, 6 oars and a hand propeller. And guests at the regatta were allowed to tour the boat, the brand new lifeboat, docked at the pier. The prizes for the regatta the second year were unparalleled. For instance, the Sweepstakes prize, a solid sterling silver oval punch bowl, 25 inches wide and 16 inches high. A silver berry bowl, a pair of sterling silver satin and cashmere engraved and gold-lined drinking goblets, a Neptune ice set with marine designs, a gold-lined boat-shaped fruit dish. The value of the prizes in today's dollar, over $15,000. Now, the first day of the race, remember the Oceanic Regatta in 1875 was to have 2 days of racing. And the first day, a fog rolled in and a nor'easter kicked up. So the race was delayed. And the Boston Globe reported that little was happening on Star Island except promenading and gossiping at the Oceanic. So the next day, the class races were held. And again, the stake boat for the first class race had drifted 3.5 miles off course because of the previous day's storm. So the race took place, but boy, there was a lot of dispute because of that stake boat drifting. The New York Times reported, after protracted investigation and almost interminable discussion, judges rendered a decision at 10:30 p.m. that the only boat that actually rounded the drifted stake boat won the first prize. No other prize were given. The America had come in fourth. This created a huge storm amongst the registered sailing boats. Most of the ships left. There weren't enough entrants for the following day's sweepstakes race. Poor wrote in letters to the editor, to newspapers such as the Boston Globe, saying, look, the yachtsman selected the course. I hired the best judges I could, purchased the prizes, the awards. I had no control over this. But the reputation of the regatta suffered. Butler, though, with the America, decided, along with the captain of a competing ship, the Resolute, that they would hold 2 races, 2 friendly races, given that the sweepstakes race wasn't to take place. America won both of those races, one of them by almost 3 minutes and the other by almost 5. So Butler was awarded the Silver Punch Bowl, the Grand Sweepstakes Prize. He was given the prize at the Oceanic, and he sailed away with the silver punch bowl on the America's captain's table. And Butler later maintained that he won the famous Isles of Shoals Regatta against such competitors as the Resolute, Rambler, Foam, Fearless, and Halcyon, even though 4 of those boats had left and gone home. Now, Poor held a yachtsman's ball for the Second Oceanic Regatta. This is a card from the dance. The Oceanic was decorated with bunting and flowers and Chinese lanterns. Each gentleman attending the yachtsman's ball got a boutonniere, courtesy of the lady guests. And you'll notice from the dance card, the dancers were to participate in lancers, waltzes, quadrilles, different types of dances. Now, I think this particular yachtsman's ball for the Second Oceanic Regatta on Star Island illustrates one of the major differences between the types of clientele that came to the Oceanic on Star Island versus those who went and stayed at the Appledore House across the harbor on Appledore Island. That very same summer that the yachtsmen were dancing at the Oceanic Regatta Ball, there was a guest over at Appledore House who was staying and who was writing a diary documenting her stay. And what she said in the summer of 1873 was that one evening she went downstairs from her room to the dance room at the Appledore House. And what she saw was so scandalous, she turned around and went back to her room. The same thing happened the second night, and she decided she would leave the hotel. The impropriety was just overwhelmed her. What they were doing in the ballroom of the Appledore House, they were dancing a waltz, which was considered scandalous because you had to hold your partner rather close. Meanwhile, over on Star Island, of course, they were dancing the night away at the Yachtsman's Ball. Descriptions of staying at the Oceanic versus Appledore House. The Oceanic on Star Island is the modern establishment and is patronized chiefly by the lovers of modern things. The Appledore House takes the other crowd. This summer, it is said, the Oceanic House on Star Island was the gayest, the Appledore the most elegant and comfortable. It was thought that Appledore House catered to a sophisticated, elegant, sedate crowd, and the Oceanic catered to a younger, more exuberant crowd, much like ourselves. This is a letter written by the famous author John Greenleaf Whittier to Annie Fields of Boston, a writer in her own right. And Whittier notes of his stay on Appledore Island, "We had a charming time at the island. There were 300 or 400 people there, mostly nice folks, solid and respectable. The fast boys and girls go to Star Island." Sadly, after 3 seasons, the Oceanic, built by John Poor on Star Island, was destroyed by fire. No one was hurt. It was off season. The glow of the flames could reportedly be seen from Boston. Poor had a second in a series of calamities. The first, of course, was the scandal around the Oceanic Regatta. The second was that this fire happened and there was an insurance problem Poor had directed his agent to refile the upcoming year's insurance policy the day before the Oceanic burned down. That agent had failed to do so. So there was quite a lawsuit about that. Undaunted though, Poor rebuilt the Oceanic as described by Oscar Layton. Mr. Poor, with dauntless energy, commenced at once to build the present Oceanic before the ashes of the first building cooled off. He reopened the Oceanic, a large building, very unconventional in form, its peculiar outline admitting of a fine ocean view from every window in the house, as reported by the Boston Daily Globe. And we know that's because Poor joined up some existing buildings on Star Island to make up the new Oceanic. Poor ended up, oh, here we have Atlantic House, the boarding house we talked about earlier, as well as Gosport House, which Poor joined with some lumber and produced the second Oceanic. When the resort industry died down at Star Island, the Laytons had taken over the Oceanic on Star Island as well as their owned Appledore House on Appledore. John Poor had pretty much had it, packed up his son and his wife and went back to Boston. Subsequently, when the resort business died down, Star Island became the spiritual conference center it is today, where programs have operated for more than 120 years. The Oceanic Hotel, through the years, has stood the test of time. And while over 140 years have passed since the sights and sounds of John Poor's Oceanic Regattas filled Gosport Harbor, within the last several years, the regatta at Gosport Harbor and the festivities at the Oceanic have been revived. And hopefully, with the appreciation of people like us, the Oceanic and Regatta will live on for another 140 years at sea. If you'd like, you can unmute yourself.
Very good, Anne.
Thanks,
Well,
Ann.
thank you.
Very nice.
Excellent.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Wow.
And the America's Cup yachts, many of them were built in Bristol, Rhode Island, where I served a church and where the Herreshoffs worshipped in subsequent generations. And there were still 2 Herreshoffs there when I was there. And so they built the Defender and several other of the America's Cups, but not the America. It was fascinating. And there's a museum there about the America's Cup, which is really interesting.
That's wonderful. Sadly, the schooner America eventually ended up in a museum in Annapolis. And one winter in the 1940s, she was being stored in a shed and snow collapsed the roof.
Oh no.
And she was smushed to smithereens.
Ooh.
A rather sad ending.
Yes.
No, that's awful. That's terrible. We like it.
Smushed to smithereens is a technical historical term. I wanted to explain
Thank you
it.
for that. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great.
And did you say that the America was sunk and then raised up?
Yeah,
By the Union Army?
yeah. After she won the race that became the America's Cup,
Mhm.
she was purchased by an Englishman who used her as a blockade runner during the Civil War, operating for the South. And then when the Union troops, when it became obvious to the Confederacy that the Union troops were overtaking the South, they sunk America so she couldn't be captured by the Union Army. And the Union Army pulled her up and refitted her and used her for the rest of the war.
Wow. Quite a history.
Yeah. We talk a lot about the famous visitors to Celia Thaxter's salon on Appledore, but Star Island has some of its own famous visitors, and Colonel Benjamin Butler certainly is one of the more colorful.
How did he get elected governor of Massachusetts? That
Yeah.
must have been something.
He was actually a good politician. He was a really good administrator. Despite some of his other qualities.
Or because of, come on.
Okay, politics. But what fascinates me is that he had this kind of dual personality. I mean, he was this flamboyant, rambunctious, no holds barred kind of guy, but he quietly did a number of things for populations that, to provide populations like African Americans and women who did not have rights at that time with those rights. He did it quietly, and he did it despite the unpopularity of those moves.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, which was kind of remarkable.
I have a question, and when he
Yes.
rebuilt the Oceanic, did he rebuild the ballroom? And what room would that be now?
That room is actually Elliott Hall. It was
Oh.
designed as a dance / stage room. Lawrence in the Oceanic, a room on the main floor, which is currently used mostly for art sort of programs and
Yes.
classes,
Yep.
was originally a billiard hall. And you can tell that the long bench on the side
Yeah.
was for spectators.
Oh,
of pool
Oh, love that.
tournaments.
Step below.
And downstairs in Pell Hall, you can still see the remnants of the floor from one bowling alley. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope you have a
Thank you. This
safe
was
and
great.
wonderful season.
Great.
See
Yes,
you all on Star soon, hopefully.
Yeah,
can't wait.
you bet. Look forward to it.
Mm.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.